So given that AirChat is a primarily audio and video, but most people do audio platform, the question is going to arise: how do you communicate well on AirChat? And this was inspired. I was just listening to Michelle talk, and then I feel like she communicates very, very concisely, and she rarely says and she gets exactly to the point. And I notice Naval does this as well. And I feel like we should probably learn more, and maybe they can give some advice on how they develop this ability, because think it's very important. Actually, another thing I'd be curious to know, Michelle and Naval, do you guys think ahead for because it seems to me that when you're talking, it's like you're talking in a straight line, right? Like a lot of people when they talk, it's like they take 3 steps forward, they retract what they say, actually what I mean to say is this, but you speak, it seems extemporaneously, but it also feels like it's also prepared. Not that it feels like it's prepared, but you talk as concisely and precisely as someone that prepares. So how did you develop the skill?
Hey, Tomiwa, I am surprised and flattered that you would even group me in the same category as Naval around this type of thing, because he's a far better speaker than I am, in my opinion. He is someone who is very experienced with investing, has led a lot of companies, and I'm quite new to a lot of this stuff. I give demos occasionally. I've spoken at some conferences, though. So I have a little bit of practice public speaking, but I never thought of myself as somebody who was particularly great at it. Although with AirChat, if I don't really know what I'm going to say beforehand, I may say it a few times until it is much more easily expressed. And then I will send the audio message after I'm happy with it. But a lot of times I will record multiple times the same idea because I want it to come out smoothly. Though I've heard a lot of people who've been on AirChat for a while tell me that after using this app for some time that they're able to notice their hedging and certain inflections in their voice that they would like to change. And over time, they feel that they've become more effective speakers.
Hey, Tomiwa. I think you and Michelle are actually both great speakers. To answer your question, though, I think practice makes perfect, right? The more that you're actually able to just practice speaking, the better you'll get. Especially with AirChat, you have a pretty nice feedback loop of being able to hear yourself after you speak and kind of self-correct in really small iterative loops. So I think that's really helpful as well, because you can move towards how you want to sound. And there's no right way for how anyone could sound, I guess, but you can form that opinion yourself and then adjust over time. I'll also re-record messages too, like you mentioned, Michelle, especially when I'm trying to get a longer thought out. And oftentimes, while I'll be iterating through it, I'll come up with new ideas and then be able to whittle down the core essence of what I was trying to communicate. This is the second time that I'm recording this message, by the way.
There is no question in my mind. Twitter made me a better writer. AirChat has made me a better speaker. I don't think ahead. I speak in the moment. I try to use short sentences and short chits. I will pause when needed as opposed to using filler words like and like, but I am still guilty of using so and yeah and you know. And practice makes perfect. Hearing yourself back is the best training. Just do it often enough, listen to yourself back, and keep your chits concise. At least as a listener, I don't care so much if somebody is a good speaker or not, and I don't care if they have filler words or not. What I care is about the quality of their ideas, how relevant the chit is, how self-aware they are, and honestly, very importantly, how short the chit is. I would rather have three short chits from the same speaker than have one long chit, because it's much easier to navigate and share and respond to them point by point. My biggest pieces of advice would be, don't be afraid to just pause. You don't need to insert a filler word. You can literally just pause. Record shorter chits, and don't be afraid to re-record. And that's it.
Out of those, I would like to underline re-recording. I re-record pretty much every chit I make between 1 to 5 times because I want it to be as distilled as possible.
I learned in the old days to be a better speaker by transcribing all my user interviews and user tests for reports. It was painful, but I learned a lot. And it's true right now with AirChat. If I'm re-listening to myself with the words, I kind of, learn more about how I'm expressing myself. It's strangely attractive.
If instead of how to speak well, you were thinking about how to write well or how to play a sport well or a musical instrument, you might see that they're not as different. I propose that we are all innately able to do this. We all have what it takes to be a great speaker. Then you identify all the different elements that make up this craft. If it was a sport, it would be drills. If it was a musical instrument, it will be your scales and chords. And in this case, it's your voice, your tonality, your ability to change your tone or put a strategic pause there if you need to, or use the pause to think. More importantly, getting comfortable with sharing your thoughts, doing that often, listening to yourself and allowing your creativity to connect to what you hear and seeing it as part of who you are, accepting your accent, accepting your filler words, accepting your errors in grammar or pronunciation, and being okay with what comes out, knowing that it's a work in process and it can always get better the more you do it.
Public speaking is mostly about confidence. And the Dale Carnegie School of Public Speaking understood this. So their number one technique was that when you were learning to public speak, you would get up in front of the class and you would just talk. And then in the audience, the other students were allowed to compliment you on something you did well, but they generally were not supposed to criticize you or correct you. The idea being that humans learn much more from positive feedback. And when confidence is the main issue, you pretty much only want to provide positive feedback. So it's really just about confidence is what it boils down to. And it has to be authentic and earned. You can't fake it. But the more confident you become, the more naturally you will speak, the more authentic your conversation will be, and the better of a speaker you will become.
Very true. Confidence has a lot to do with overcoming an illusionary fear. I think we fear that there's a spot, that we're putting ourselves on the spot when there's actually no spot. We fear that people are going to equate what we say with who we are. And perhaps there's an illusionary fear that we cannot take things back. And look, even if there was no delete chit option, I can change my mind in the next chit. And nobody needs to know. It's for me with myself. The game is ultimately me with myself. So confidence is basically a reflection of how you are with yourself, how comfortable you are with yourself. And sharing that, again, halfway painted, it's okay.
It's more illusory in modern times than it used to be, but definitely when you get on stage, you're making a bid for status. And if that bid fails, you may get lowered in status. You may actually get torn apart by an angry mob. So there is a legitimate fear underlying the whole thing, but definitely the irrational fear of saying something innocuous or simple is unfounded. Looking stupid, that's kind of a low risk. The higher risk is you go outside the Overton window and you get torn apart by the mob, or the modern version of it is you get canceled.
This is true. And I think if you're interested, we could unpack it just a little more, because there is a thin line between self-preservation in this way, where the loss of status or the perhaps risk of being canceled or unfollowed is so high in somebody's perspective that we may attach too much fear to the alternative proposition, which would be speak your mind, be radical, say the unthinkable, innovate, create a new explanation. So what is the real cost of this attitude?
The benefit is if you can say what everybody else is thinking, but is too afraid to say, then you come across as cool. That's leadership, and people want to follow you. But if you get canceled, if you get torn apart, if you get arrested, then people say, oops, I knew it. We shouldn't have crossed that line. So it's the risk takers who get rewarded, but they also suffer the cost of the risks. Now that's if you're status seeking. If you're truth seeking, you tend to end up more and more isolated over time, and you keep largely to yourself. Because if you truly want to pursue just what is true, then it's almost impossible to talk to almost anybody else about it. That's why I think that truth is a lonely business.
Yes, and there's still the Buddha that wouldn't tell people what truth is, remember, would hit them on the head, because you cannot really speak truth. But yet we do want to converse, we do want to coalesce, we want to co-create, we want to take it forward, don't we?
One reason that AirChat might make people better speakers is that by default, it has you listen to your own recording when you're done with it before posting. Most people rarely hear themselves speak unless you're like a singer or a podcaster, something like that. A lot of people actually say that they don't like the sound of their own voice. And if you don't like how you sound, maybe you should listen and see if you can change it a little bit, or just get used to the sound of your own voice so you're not so embarrassed about speaking. It's pretty logical if you think about it. When you write, you're constantly reading your writing and then editing it and therefore improving your writing. Athletes are constantly watching tape from their previous games and evaluating themselves and analyzing what they can do better. It makes sense that by listening to yourself speak, you could become a better speaker over time.
I heard this theory, and I think I heard it like a long time ago. I'm not sure how much of it is true. Is that's because most people hear themselves with like 50% outside voice, but like your ears pick up the sound waves, and 50% of it is internal from like within your skull. And so then when you externalize fully and you hear just, how it sounds 100% outside, it just feels weird because it's you. It's like an uncanny valley feeling in the beginning. I think it passes with time. The more you hear yourself, the less uncanny it becomes. I'm not 100% sure about this theory, but that's what I heard.
Rushing can partly be also because you are in the center of attention and it's an uncomfortable spot. So your thoughts are not exactly in the speed of your speak. So that results that filler words it is. Yet I would say that the biggest thing is that you haven't really figured out what you want to say. Your thoughts are not clear, so your speak is in level with that.